All right, today we're digging into the Munich Conference of 1938. Now, this was a deal that was supposed to secure peace for good. But what it actually did was pave the road to World War II. And get this, it led to one of history's most shocking alliances. I mean, this is the central puzzle, right? How did these two mortal enemies, Hitler and Stalin, end up becoming allies? Think about it. In August 1939, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, two regimes that absolutely despised each other, signed a non-aggression pact. It stunned the entire world and basically gave Hitler the green light to invade Poland. So, to understand how on earth this happened, we gotta rewind the clock by 1 year, to a crisis that had Europe holding its breath. So our story really kicks off in early 1938. There's this crisis brewing in Central Europe, and it's all centered on a region called the Sudetenland. This was the flashpoint. This is what would set the entire continent on the path to war. Okay, so what exactly was the Sudetenland? Well, it was a border region of Czechoslovakia that was carved out after World War I. And the crucial thing to know is that it was home to 3 million ethnic Germans. See, when the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed, these people suddenly found themselves living as a minority inside a new Slavic country. And you can bet Hitler seized on their grievances. It was the perfect excuse for his whole Heimansreich policy, his mission to bring all ethnic Germans back into the German Empire. And look, this wasn't happening in a vacuum. Not at all. Hitler had been pushing the boundaries for years. Back in '36, he marched troops into the Rhineland, totally violating the Treaty of Versailles. What did the West do? Nothing. Then, in March 1938, he just annexes Austria. Again, crickets. So by the time he starts demanding the Sudetenland, it's pretty clear what's happening. It's just the next logical step in this pattern of unchecked aggression. So to deal with this escalating crisis, the Western powers decided on a strategy. But it wasn't confrontation. No, it was negotiation. And this leaves us to the now infamous Munich Conference in September of 1938, really the absolute high point of the policy we all know as appeasement. Now, the list of who showed up to this conference is, well, it's pretty revealing. You had the big four Western European leaders, Hitler for Germany, Neville Chamberlain for Britain, Édouard Daladier for France, and of course Mussolini for Italy. And they were all there to decide the fate of Central Europe. But what's even more telling is who wasn't invited to the party. Yeah, two absolutely critical players were left out in the cold. First, can you believe it? Czechoslovakia, the very country whose fate was being decided, wasn't even at the table. And second, the Soviet Union. Now this was a huge deal. The USSR had a mutual defense pact with both France and Czechoslovakia. They were a major regional power, a key player, and they were very, very deliberately snubbed. You know, this famous cartoon by David Lowe just perfectly captures how the Soviets felt. You see Stalin looking on while the other leaders are literally carving up a map, and the caption says it all. What? No chair for me? It just highlights the complete absurdity of the situation. You're deciding the fate of a nation, and you exclude its most powerful regional ally. It's wild. And the result of this conference, well, it was a total capitulation. Czechoslovakia, basically presented with a done deal by its own allies, was forced to hand over the Sudetenland to Germany. And just like that, they lost their critical border fortifications and about a third of their population. And then you have that famous moment. Neville Chamberlain gets back to London, he waves this piece of paper, and he declares he's secured peace for our time. At that moment, it was hailed as this incredible triumph of diplomacy, like they just dodged a bullet and averted a huge war. But as we all know now, that optimism, it was tragically misplaced. Okay, so this brings us right back to the core question. Why on earth would Britain and France deliberately shut out a powerful potential ally against Hitler? It doesn't seem to make sense, right? Well, there were actually a few big overlapping reasons. All right, there were really four key things going on here. First, just pure ideological hostility. I mean, Chamberlain and other leaders in the West were deeply anti-communist. They saw Stalin as just as big a threat as Hitler, if not bigger. Second, bringing in the Soviets went completely against their whole appeasement strategy. They wanted to talk to Hitler, to reason with him, not build some big, scary coalition to confront him. Third, there were real doubts about military strength. A lot of Western leaders believed Stalin's brutal purges had totally crippled the Red Army. And finally, you had a simple geography problem. Poland and Romania flat out refused to let Soviet troops cross their land to get to Czechoslovakia. But if you were sitting in Moscow, this whole thing looked very, very different.
Stalin didn't see this as some simple diplomatic snub. Oh no. He saw it as a deliberate plot by the West to point German aggression eastward, right at the USSR. He was convinced they were hoping Hitler and Stalin would just destroy each other, leaving Britain and France to come in and pick up the pieces.
And it's this deep suspicion that sets everything in motion. It starts a chain of events that leads directly back to that shocking alliance we talked about at the beginning. Because the aftermath of Munich wasn't peace. It was a terrifying acceleration toward an even bigger war. So get this, it took less than 6 months. After promising he had no more territorial demands in Europe, Hitler's armies rolled right into Prague and swallowed up the rest of Czechoslovakia. That single act just shattered the entire logic of appeasement. It proved Hitler wasn't just about uniting Germans anymore. He was conquering non-Germans. The game had completely changed.
Meanwhile, Stalin is watching all of this very, very closely. And he gives this famous speech where he sends a crystal clear signal. He says the Soviet Union will not be used as a pawn. He warns they won't be drawn into conflicts by warmongers who are accustomed to have others pull the chestnuts out of the fire. Basically, he's saying, we're not doing your dirty work for you. For Stalin, the whole idea of collective security against fascism, it was officially dead.
So by the summer of 1939, Stalin basically has two very different offers on the table. On one hand, you've got Britain and France. What are they offering? Slow, half-hearted talks, vague promises, and they still won't guarantee his troops can even get where they need to go. But then you have the offer from Hitler, and it's stunningly pragmatic. He's offering an immediate non-aggression pact with a secret deal to carve up Eastern Europe. It would give Stalin control over Eastern Poland and the Baltic states. No strings attached. When you lay it all out, the logic is actually pretty clear. Step 1. Munich proves to Stalin that this whole collective security thing is a joke, and an alliance with the West is totally unreliable. Step 2. He completely loses faith in Britain and France. He thinks they're trying to play him. Step 3. Germany comes along with a much better, much more concrete deal on the table. So step 4. Stalin chooses cold, hard pragmatism over his anti-fascist ideology. The Nazi-Soviet pact, it wasn't some random betrayal out of nowhere. It was the direct, logical consequence of what happened at Munich.
And all of this leaves us with a final, chilling question. The whole point of appeasement at Munich was to prevent a war. But by shutting Stalin out, by proving to him that the West couldn't be trusted, did they accidentally push two mortal enemies straight into an alliance? Did they end up guaranteeing a far worse, far more devastating conflict just 1 year later? It's a question that honestly historians are still debating right now.